All right, let's call this meeting of the Madison Select Board to order on Monday, January 25th, 2021 at 6:30 p.m. Please join me in saluting the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Going a little quick, Mr. Gilpin. Let the record show all selectmen are present. Consent agenda warrant number 25, 1, 11, 21. Payroll register number 1, 7, 21. Number 2, 1, 14, 21. And number 3, 1, 21, 21.
Make a motion we accept it. Second is read.
We have a motion and a second to approve the warrant and payroll register as read. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? All in favor, the motion carries. Acceptance of the meeting minutes from January 11, 2021.
So moved is read.
We have a motion and a second to accept the meeting minutes for January 21, 2021. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? All in favor? Motion carries. Old business. Mrs. Dwyer? Mr. Savage? Mr. Gopian?
None for me.
Mr. Moody?
None, sir.
And none for me. Items of communication. Mr. Town Manager?
Couple of things to pass along to you. In your packets, I got a letter from Mary Lou Sable on Friday, and I thought it was worthwhile putting in your packets. After the public hearing we had on tipping fees, Mary Lou, who operates Three Rivers Disposal, went back and did some more calculations. And just to give you a fair idea, she feels that if the tipping fee is eliminated, she would have to raise her rates from $20 a month to $30 a month, not $25. So pass that along to the board. In your packets, I also included a Selectmens meeting schedule for the next several months. And I highlighted the 2 meetings in March that may need to be adjusted according to my availability. So, and also in that packet is a budget timeline that talks about the process of our budget, and I hope that by February 22nd, we'll be able to have an initial meeting where we'll talk about budget considerations, the big ideas, not the line item budget. And I'd like to invite as many members of the advisory board who would be willing to listen in and participate in that meeting so they'll know what we're talking about, what we're expecting. Just want to pass along to you that according to Sheriff Lancaster, the 2 deputies that were being processed in January are on the job. So Deputy Smith and Deputy Gallagher joined Deputy Wood and Mary, and now we have a full complement of deputies from the Madison division. Now, of course, with these 2 new hires, that means academy training, and so those 2 new are not green or blueprints. What's the blueprint? And so they will need to go through the State Police Academy sometime over the next 18 months. And just finally, in your packets,
One question. Who pays for that?
it's part of the town's agreement with the Sheriff's Department. The training, we pay for the training. Finally, you've signed off on some paperwork for GoLab and the work that they're doing down at Madison Paper. That's part of the closing out of the first grant that we got for $400,000 that paid for a lot of that demolition. So the demolition, as you can see by the street, is mostly finished and cleaned up. We talked about the last meeting, the town has received a $1 million grant to help with work on the inside, some infrastructure, HVAC, heating units, that sort of thing. That work is scheduled to start probably in March with some engineering work. So, and you'll continue to see as that grant is facilitated, it'll be done the same way, where work will be done, invoices will be signed off by GoLab and the town pays them, and then the town draws down that grant money to make us whole. And that's all I have.
I just have a question on the meeting on the 15th and the 29th. We're going to wait for a bit before we decide what we're going to do with those.
I still haven't scheduled my trip out of state.
Okay.
And so my hope is right now that I'll be gone late February through the first week of March, and then back long enough so that I can either test or quarantine, so that I can be available in person for the next meeting. Now, whether that's the 15th or the 22nd, that's still up in the air right now.
Okay, all right, so we'll just play that by ear.
So you can all come to Oklahoma with me, and I'm sure my son Jake will put you up, and
Yes.
it'll be a great time.
All right, new business. Discuss proposed updates to the personnel policy, earned paid leave.
So this document is the same as what was introduced at the end of the last meeting, and just to refresh your memory, state law now requires that all employers that have more than 10 employees should be accruing some earned time off regardless of the position. So how this affects the town is we have staff, part-time and full-time, that we automatically have a provision for this in the personnel policy. This would apply to certain positions that we don't currently accrue time off for, such as animal control, code enforcement, the library substitute, and a few of our interns, or even some of the recreation students, and the part-time or the volunteer firefighters. The state law, as unfortunately as written, is confusing, and there are certain things that a volunteer fire department can accrue money or time off for, and certain activities they can't. If they come to a training, those hours can go toward accruing earned time off. If they fight a fire, those hours cannot go to accruing paid time off. I'm not sure why, it's just the nature of the law right now. For kids that work in our recreation department, if they work between the months of June and September, they don't accrue any paid time off. If they work between September and May, they do accrue time off. So kudos to Tammy Carrier. Unfortunately, she's at a school board meeting tonight, but she's done a lot of work on this. And what we're asking you, the board, to do is to approve the language that's on this page here that will be added to the town's personnel policy. This does not get into the job of actually accruing the hours and actually allowing an employee to use these hours over the course of time. That's all done by administration. So the supervisor would be in charge of how these hours are used, and the finance office would be in charge of how they're accrued. The first paragraph talks about the state law that requires this, effective January 1st of this year. The second paragraph talks about up to 40 hours. So once a employee, say they earn 5, 6, 8 hours a year, and they never use it, the maximum, the most they can accrue is 40 hours. The third paragraph explains that they will be not able to use it until they've been employed for over 120 days. They must give notice in the next paragraph to their supervisor on their intent to use the leave. And then this accrued leave has no cash value. So if an employee leaves our employment and has 30, 40 hours on the books, according to this policy, we're not guaranteeing them that we'll pay anything out of that. Similar to our sick leave policy that's in our policy right now, if you work for us for less than 20 years, that sick leave is only paid out at 25%. So if you had 100 hours of sick leave, you only get paid for 25 when you leave the relationship with the town. And then the final paragraph explains that this action, because it was a state legislative action, does not apply to any employees that are covered under collective bargaining agreements or unions. And of course, all of our unions already have more than this as far as accrued paid time off. So any questions that have come up over the last couple of weeks or thoughts?
Mooney.
Am I understanding this correctly with part-time employees that were not required to provide benefits? Now, if they work 20 hours this week and 20 hours, so in a month, if they work 40 hours, they get 1 hour?
Correct.
Even by,
So our part-timers that we have that are hired, that might work 20 hours a week, we have a greater system. I'll give you an example. The employees that work 15 hours a week at the library, they're earning, I believe, 3 hours. Yeah, 3 hours a month, 3.5 hours a month. So that would be more than, and they work about 60 hours. So we already meet the minimum of this 1 hour per 40 hours for our part-time, and of course our full-time workers exceed that as well. So I think for sick time, our full-time workers earn 8 hours a month.
Isn't there in the contract, isn't there a number of weeks that they're guaranteed for a year? Does that supersede this?
Yes, anything that we have that's already in the contract or already in our personnel policy far exceeds what this requires.
Should go.
Are we obligated to still follow this?
Are we obligated to follow this?
For example, like these people that work 40 hours a week, right? Okay, they're all under collective bargaining, correct?
Not all of our employees, just the 4 employees in the highway department.
Okay, they're the only ones that go underneath this.
Right.
Okay, so so if somebody's a 40-hour, every week, they get an extra hour, right?
No, this doesn't apply to people that we already set aside sick time for. It only applies to those that we don't set aside sick time for. But right now, our recreation employees, our volunteer firefighters, our animal control officer, and our code enforcement officer, those are all hired as per diem employees, and they don't have any benefits, and we don't accrue any sick time for them. This law would require us to start doing this. This law does not add an extra hour per 40 hours to the existing sick time.
So the kid who is working at the ice skating rink, he works 20 hours, he accrues the time. When he walks out the door, he hasn't used that, he doesn't get it.
Right.
And so if he says, I want to take one of my accrued hours,
He would have to,
your.
he would have to meet with, right, in that case, if he's accrued an hour and he wants to take an hour, then he would talk with Joe Hayden when he does his time card and say, I worked 5 hours, but I'm gonna put down 6, I'm gonna use my earned time. So that's how it'll be facilitated with the supervisor and the worker.
Go.
But isn't he getting paid for that?
He's getting paid for the 5 hours he worked, and he's gonna use that extra hour that he didn't work as earned pay time off.
So he was gonna get paid for that.
Right. But if he doesn't use it and never comes back to work for the town, then we don't have to pay him out anything he's accrued automatically. That's a way of limiting the liability.
How many of these hours can you accumulate?
Maximum of 40 over the course of how many ever years they work.
So I'm still confused on the part, if I work for 40 hours for the town and I'm not under collective bargaining, so I don't get one a week?
No, you actually get, according to our personnel policy, you get 2 hours a week. Because you get 8 hours a month, sick time.
But this says, this is by the state, so
Yeah.
you're not gonna, you think you win that battle?
There's no battle to win here.
Well,
The state's made it pretty clear that this is the minimum. We're already accruing the minimum for all of our full-time workers because we're giving them 2 hours every week or 8 hours a month.
Yes.
Those employees are already receiving that benefit.
Right.
So that doesn't apply to them.
Right. This is a
Only for
new
those that
law
don't.
to try to capture people outside of those that already have these benefits.
Nice. So they're not gonna, a 40-hour employee isn't gonna get this in addition to what they already get, because they already get it, they're covered. This is just for other folks that are not.
That's the way I'm reading it.
Maybe we did this for a while.
All right, so we're looking for a motion to approve or add addition to the personnel policy.
I'll make a motion.
We have a motion and a second to approve this policy, to the personnel policy. earned paid leave. Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? 4 in favor? Favor or opposed? Opposed, 1 opposed. Mr. Lopez is opposed. All right, discuss property values.
I wanted to put this on the agenda just to get us thinking. We don't have to try to go too far down this road tonight. But I think we owe it to the taxpayers to get them thinking that the way home sales have been over the last couple of years is going to drive up their property values, which means that regardless of what you do with the budget, or the school, or the county, because property values have to go up, people's tax bills are going to go up. So I'm trying to get that message out as many different ways as I can. And this spreadsheet that is in your packet that has a little bit of history on it, I'll just take you briefly back to, almost 18, 20 years ago. In 2003, the median sales price in Madison was $76,000. If you were in the market in the early to mid 2000s, you knew there was a big spike. And home sales went up and up and up into the 2007s, and then you had the big bubble burst, and you had the big drop off in 2008. So in 2003 to 2007, the median sales price went up from $76,000 to $101,000. Later around 2008, the tax assessor in town, Bill Van Tynen, conducted a program where he adjusted the property values around town because the sales had gone up so much. And then I added 2011 there, so 4 years later, after the bubble burst, the average sale price went down to about $82,000. So it went up and went down, but it didn't go all the way back down to as low as it was in 2003. So fast forward to kind of where we are now, and then now I want to talk about the sales ratio. And as assessors, one of the things that you look at is the past year's sales, how many of them sold for more than what we have it valued at, compared to how many sold for less than what we have it valued at. On average, over the last 4 years, we've had about 50 sales a year. I would venture to guess this past year, 2020, we had more than that. But, so you have a picture of about 200 sales from 2015 to 2019. Now in 2015, our sales ratio was around 97%. Next year, the sales ratio was around 99%. That's good. You want to be as close to 100% as you can, because that says, on average, the homes that are selling are valued pretty close to that. In 2017, the market starts to go up, and we're hitting at about 94% ratio. In 2018, the market goes up again, and we're at about 91% ratio. Shirley and I have been talking about this. We're kind of on the edge of a big step down. Last year, home prices were outlandish in our area, much greater than we've ever seen. You talk to any realtor, it was just crazy. We had the first home on the lake that I'm aware of that sold for $600,000 this past summer.
So can I, you're saying that we're on the verge of a sales ratio
Drop.
drop?
Right.
All right.
Once that sales ratio drops below 90%, the state starts to punish the municipality. The state says, you're not raising your values high enough, so we're not going to give you all of your homestead exemption. We're not going to give you all of your revenue sharing. We're not going to give you all of your Betty that's due back. So those things make up about $1.6 million to the town every year. So if we're below 90%, they're going to hit us by whatever percent under 100 we are. So if we're 11%, 12%, 15% off, they're going to hit those reimbursements to us. So it's kind of a checks and balance from the state that makes sure that we're not just keeping our property values artificially low. So, to say all that, Shirley and I are recommending that when we set commitment this year, we take a look at some different models and we bring proposals to the assessors and say, we're gonna recommend a 5% across the board increase. So what that does to someone that has a $115,000 house, next year it's gonna go up to $121,000, and their taxes are gonna go up by probably $100. So I put in there in this handout an assumption that if we did a 5%, then a 3%, then a 2%, maybe we will keep up into the 90s. So we can claim 100%, we won't lose that funding from the state. But that does mean that the person whose house is valued at $115,000 now could be up in the $125,000, $127,000 value within a couple of years. Now, the other thing is, if this happens and all your budgets can maintain, 2.5% increase, something normal like that, then your mill rate will probably stabilize or go down a little bit. So the greater your valuation, the lower your mill rate is needed to cover. So I just wanted to lay all that out there to have a brief discussion tonight, to see what direction or any ideas the board may have about going forward. But I believe this is something that's pertinent to make public now, knowing that, as you get to town meeting, usually the big questions are, what's gonna happen to my taxes? What's this budget gonna do to my taxes? And we have to be relaying to people that this year, it's not necessarily the budget that's going to impact your taxes, it's the last 2 or 3 years of home sales that will impact your taxes.
So when would you get the 1920?
Shirley is working on that right now. So within the next few months, I would propose that we schedule an assessors meeting, so Shirley can give you an idea of what that would look like.
Okay.
But she says it's already well over $131,000, which was the average price the year before.
Now, we have that broken down into sections like Lakewood, East Madison, in town. Is that possible to?
You may recall back in 2008, Bill Van Tynen did that, and he had different sections of the town broken up, and the increase to the older homes in town wasn't as significant as the increase out on the lake or increase in the rural areas. Shirley can do that, and I guess we'll take direction from the assessors. But right now, what we're seeing in home sales is, it doesn't matter where you are. Homes that are valued for $80,000 have been selling for $150,000. Homes that were valued for $150,000 have been selling for $350,000. Homes that are valued for $300,000 have been selling for $600,000. So it doesn't matter where it is. So it's kind of across the board right now.
Mr. Savage?
Is the current revaluation gonna take all this into effect when we wouldn't have to really act on this? I mean, we're 1 year and a 3-year revaluation.
We don't have time to wait for the completed valuation. Property values are going up faster than we can catch up with. So we're, like you said, we're about a third through collecting all the data, getting new pictures, making sure we've accounted for all the buildings and all the conditions. We just don't have the workforce to finish it before we drop off that 90%. And I talked to Shirley about this, and many towns are doing these across the board increases just to keep up. I talked to some folks from Cornville the other day. Cornville had to jump their values 30% just to keep up with what's going on.
Moody?
So that also means that if I buy a house next to you that was $100,000 and I paid $150,000, that's gonna make your valuation go up.
Right.
Because you're in that neighborhood of that price range. And it's a ricocheting effect.
That's exactly what happens, and that, even though sales have been 60, 70, 80% above valuation, we're certainly not recommending raising valuations that. Just because a $150,000 house was valued at $80,000 we're not talking about making that 80,000 valuation up to 150. We're just talking about a 5% increase or a 10% increase over time. But if a person goes to sell it right now,
Right.
they would be able to sell it for much more than the valuation.
Yes. And that, it's like I say, it's a ripple and ricochet effect right down the line, because if yours was, if I sold mine at 300, it was 150, and yours was 100, you're gonna go up. When you want it to go up or what have you, it's got to go up.
Right. It's just a fact of the way the valuation would happen.
In the market. It's crazy.
It is right now.
Oh, it's crazy.
Any other questions?
Comments?
So you'll hear me repeat this over and over again at meetings, especially when we have the advisory board here, we're talking about the budgets and whatnot. It's just a reality. The only other thing I want to touch on before we leave this topic is, I've talked to Mr. Vinziano about this. There are towns in southern Maine and some of the more affluent areas that have tried to protect their most vulnerable parts of the population, the older part of the population on a fixed income. And they have crafted property tax assistance ordinances. You have to meet the same criteria that the state offers for its property tax relief program. So I'll give you an example. I've been looking at the town of Elliott, and they have an older population with some older valuable homes. So every person in Elliott that qualifies for the state's tax relief program, that lives in their home, has a homestead, and is over 70 years old, the town of Elliott, if they apply, will match that state rebate. So say the state gives them $250, the town will give them the $250 credit to offset their taxes. They have to have a limited income, and they have to be over a certain age. And so if the board is interested, I would like to pursue that information and try to bring an ordinance to the board that would try to help our most vulnerable. So I had Shirley ask the State Revenue Service how many people in Madison received the state property tax credit in 2019, and there were 103 people that did. So that's a pretty significant portion of our population. Now, not all of those are over 70, and I would recommend targeting a certain age group to try to protect with that additional benefit. And finally, of course, we would have to have the money to do that and have to come from another source, and we'd have to talk about that as we go down this road. So let me just get the temperature of the board. Is that something you'd like to see as far as an ordinance like that?
I'd like to see us take a look at it. I don't think it would be anything that we couldn't do.
I agree.
See if we at least get the wording on it.
How much money are we talking here?
So I would say that the town would need to put aside at least $10,000 to $15,000 to maybe offer 50 people a $300 tax rebate.
So you're talking about raising money for this, and you're talking about giving an increase to it?
Well, we're talking about you're going to have to raise property values, and that's going to raise people's taxes.
Okay, if you raise the property value, you're gonna increase the person's money there.
What their tax bill.
Right. And then if you come up with another plan like this, then you're gonna ask those same people to take some of their money to give it, how would you put it?
Well, we'll talk about where the money could come from. It may not necessarily come from the taxpayers. Direct.
It's excess and taxpayers, right?
And other sources.
All right, thank you. All right, review of the planning board bylaws.
So I believe on Zoom, we have a couple of planning board members. And in your packets, you have the proposed bylaws. Now, This was a new venture, and I commend Mary Tomlinson and the members of the planning board for putting this together. I believe it came out of a training that they attended that was a good idea to have bylaws that govern the operation of the planning board. And the select board is reviewing and commenting. This doesn't have to be a situation where you vote yes or no, because these were created by the planning board for the planning board. But they thought it would be the right idea to include in these bylaws that the selectmen would have the opportunity to review them. I just have a couple of notes that I made after reviewing them. I've worked on several boards that have done bylaws, and pretty much all of them are very similar. I thought this one was very effective. Right on the bottom of the first page under jurisdiction, it clearly states that these bylaws are a third level of procedural rule. It doesn't do anything to change the fact that the planning board is guided by state law and local ordinance. So these bylaws are kind of like the local, how we take care of our business, because in our local ordinance, it doesn't say anything about how the planning board operates on a meeting-by-meeting basis. It just says we have a planning board. So these bylaws were crafted to kind of help develop that. What I'd like to do is just briefly go through these, make a couple of comments, and then if the board has any questions, if members of the planning board that are on Zoom can offer any guidance, that would be effective or helpful.
Are you saying that,
Oh, yeah, hold on just a minute, Mary, we've got a question from Mr. Woody.
are you saying that they have nothing like this at all?
That currently,
This is a new so-called program to begin with?
this is a new document, and I'll let Mary explain that, so go ahead, Mary.
Decided to move forward with developing the bylaws so that we would be compliant with Chapter 112. That's the ordinance that establishes the planning board. Section 112-3G states the planning board shall adopt rules for the transaction of business. That has never been done in the history of the planning board. And so Joel Greenwood, who's our contracted planner from BB provided us a boilerplate that was extremely comprehensive. And so in the past couple months, the planning board finessed that. We ensured that it incorporated all aspects of the ordinance, not conflict with that ordinance or not, as well as state law. So Tim mentioned the bylaws clarify how the planning board conducts business. And this process caused us to really look at all aspects of how we conduct our meetings, including the hearings, the site review, visitations, and so on. It's a living document, which means that, of course, that it will be revised as the need arises. So again, although the select board does not need to approve the bylaws, we felt that it was a courtesy that you would have the opportunity to review it and comment, because we believe that when you have many eyes looking at a piece of work, that document is going to be a better product. And so I'll be more than happy to answer any of your questions as best as I can.
Thank you, Mary. Were there any other questions about the creation of the bylaws? If not, I just had a comment, and really this is for you, Mary, on page 2. 2-1 says the Town of Madison Charter establishes the board. Madison doesn't have a charter. We only have ordinances. So I just would make sure that we make a reference to the ordinances, not the charter.
Okay.
Yeah. Other than that, I would say everything else is pretty straightforward. Talks about the roles of the chair and the vice chair. Bottom of page 3 talks about conflicts of interest and how they're dealt with. I'll just make a comment on that I think that my observations of the planning board this year is they've been very good at dealing with these issues anyhow, and I'm really glad that now they have a system written down for future boards. Top of page 4, municipal staff to the planning board. So this establishes something that the Board of Selectmen asked to establish a couple of years ago, that there will be a greater communication between the town office and the planning board. So this says the town manager can appoint a member of the town staff to act as the secretary, take notes. I will say for 2020, I acted as the secretary for the planning board, and I found it to be very helpful for me to have an idea of what's going on and to see where they're going. And then when they have questions about, town oversight of certain issues, they can ask me, and I'm right there. So I'm happy to continue that process. I just note in item 3.1, it said the board must develop and maintain all other land use ordinances. And the first one is zoning regulations. I just want to clarify that this doesn't mean that the planning board must create zoning, but if there are particular types of zoning, they must be able to regulate that. I like the fact that the meeting schedule and conduct that starts on page 5 includes information about conversations outside of regular meetings. I think that's good language for all boards to abide by. One of the things that has come up is we have many people serving on multiple boards. There are 4 members of the planning board that also serve on the budget advisory committee. So the question came up while they were processing this, well, what if those 4 members that are meeting for the budget discuss planning board issues? Well, according to their bylaws, they shouldn't discuss those planning board issues. It doesn't mean they can't serve on both boards, but they must realize that as they're gathered as budget advisory board members, they're not to be doing any planning board business. Everything else, I believe, is pretty straightforward. I'll skip ahead to page 7, rules of public participation. Again, I think these are great to have in writing, because sometimes members of the public, when they come to a meeting, they get upset because they feel that they're not able to say what they want to say. And when someone in that board meeting says, no, sir, you can only speak for 2 minutes, or no, ma'am, you can't say that at this time, somebody could challenge you and say, well, where's that written down? And you can pull out your bylaws and says it's written down right here, as expressed. So there's information on how public hearings are conducted. The last 2 pages are 10 and 11 about the decision-making process. And again, I believe for the most part, this is a process that this board has been using consistently. And it's nice to have it in writing. So that's my very cursory overview. And I didn't know if the board had any questions, or if Mary, if you had any other comments, but I see Mr. Moody has his hand up again.
Mr. Moody?
Where did this format come from? Where was it taken from?
So as Mary mentioned, we have a contracted planner from Kennebec Valley Council of Governments, Joel Greenwood.
Yes.
We pay him to come to our planning board meetings. It's very helpful since we don't have a full-time code officer.
Is this something that other towns are using, the same format?
The same format. Joel provided this from KV Cog, and he's provided it to many other municipalities.
So, in effect, these bylaws here are probably used in other towns.
Well, Mary, how much massaging do you think the planning board did?
How much what?
How much editing or changing of the boilerplate that Joel gave you?
We eliminated some items. We clarified some to meet our own ordinances. We had to revise the boilerplate so that it met our ordinance. And, there have been some revisions. For the most part, I think it's pretty much intact. What do you think, Randy? Do you here, that's 4.3, actually, it's a 4.3 board decision-making process, that if you miss the meeting related to something that we're going to take a vote on, if you're going to vote on it, you have to prove that you are knowledgeable enough that you have done the preparatory work to make a decision and vote on that. And so therefore, we're avoiding any potential appeals resulting from that. I'm not sure if that's answered the question.
So Mary, do you think these bylaws make the planning board better?
Oh,
Well,
definitely.
Right.
I do, yeah.
Right.
And certainly as, actually, it kind of brings the way the planning board functions more in line with, from a meeting situation, more in line with how the select board operates as well, to some extent. So, I mean, these are very clear guidances. Somebody new coming in to the planning board, you need to know exactly what's going to be expected. And I think in the long term, that can certainly avoid problems, especially if you're doing a site review. And, you know, we mentioned when we did a site review, in anticipation of site visitation, that there are certain things you can and can't do at a site visitation. And this spells that out.
What?
So we were very careful when we did that.
I just want everyone to know, I read this today, and learned a great deal about how planning would work. And as a new selectman to Madison, I commend you guys for pulling that together, and it's very straightforward. It answers most of the questions I think that anyone will have. So, nice job doing that.
Moody.
Mary, it's nice to see something like this developing, because we all know that in the past, sometimes the planning board has had some problems and they didn't come out on the good side. And this is the first time that I've heard that the planning board members, or some of them, have taken the initiative to go to this training to find this out. And the proof is in the pudding. This is what you've come back with, and at least it gives the planning board, as far as I'm concerned, some solid stability, so that there's no question in what direction or what your job duties are bound here.
I think about 4 or did Randy, where can Randy? I'm sorry to bring me up.
So Mary, are you still
I
there?
didn't catch that.
So Mary, I think in the last year,
I'm still here.
yeah, I think in the last year, you and Jeff Drew, Gene Denziano, and Randy took trainings, and I want to say Mark as well, but I'm not sure. And last I checked, I think everybody,
Mark did, and,
and
Mark did, and Brad has I think Brad and I, either Brad and I or Mark or Jeff and I took it several years ago, and then Jeff and I took it again 2 years ago. And so I know that all, at least 6 of us have taken that training. Done it really worthwhile.
so does the select board have any concerns or any other comments about this?
Looks good.
I think it's fantastic.
You're getting all thumbs up, guys, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, number 4, discuss filling board committee vacancies. A, planning board, Robin Turk, associate member, and B, Jack Duchamp for budget advisory committee.
So just some background information on these. Robin Turek has been asked to fill the vacancy left by Leon Dorr. Leon Dorr was appointed as an associate member along with Randy Bliss in July of this past year for a variety of reasons, Leon has not been able to fulfill his commitments, and I spoke with him this past week, and he said he would like to withdraw his name from the planning board as an associate member. So if you nominate and approve Robin Turek, she will fill that associate position through the June 30th, 2023. So essentially for the next 2.5 years. An associate member is a member that, according to the bylaws, is a member that attends the meetings, watches, learns. As they get up to speed, they can be approved by the chair to vote on an issue if a quorum is needed, or if they have been the ones that have been following a site review and other board members haven't been able to. So it allows the board to move forward without having to wait for another meeting because they don't have a quorum or make a business person wait. So it's a very important member. And when planning board members get done, we look to those associate members to fill the seat as full-time board members. So the recommendation before you is Robin Turek as an associate member.
So, put one together? or-
I'd like a motion on them separately.
Okay. All right, so we're looking for a motion for Robin Turek as associate member of the planning board.
I'll make that motion. Second.
A motion and a second to approve Robin Turek, appoint Robin Turek, associate member of the planning board. Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? All in favor, the motion carries. Now we're looking for a budget advisory committee for Jack Duchamp.
So there's, the term for budget advisory committee members is only 1 year. They have to be appointed by this board every year. I've been in conversations with Doug Denico, who's been a member of this budget advisory committee for the last 3 years. He has expressed to me that he just does not have the time or capacity to continue on this board, and he said, I will withdraw my spot if you want to appoint someone else. You have to have 15 members of the advisory board, and so this would keep us at a full complement of 15. And Jack has told me that he would be interested in serving on it.
Looking for a motion?
I'll make a motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second to appoint Jack Duchamp to the budget advisory committee. Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? We have 4 in favor, 1 opposed, Mr. Moody is opposed. Selectmen's concern, Mrs. Dwyer? Mr. Goldfinch? Mr. Sadler, sorry. Mr. Goldfinch?
On this, the Hollands one again, we're gonna bring this up again. I mean, we're gonna discuss
The tipping fees for
Yeah.
commercial haulers, that will be on the agenda for February 8th.
February, okay, I got
Mr. Moody?
None, sir.
All right, citizens' concerns? Citizens, no citizens' concerns? Okay, looking for a motion to go into executive session to discuss economic development issues pursuant to 1 MSA 405, Section 6C.
Make that motion.
Second.
I have a motion to go into executive session to discuss economic development issues pursuant to 1 MSA 405, Section 6C. All those in favor? All in favor, the motion carries. We're in executive session at 7:18.